Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's podcast in Destination Big Leagues. Today, I've got Jonathan Dambrot. Jonathan Dambrot served as a former partner at KPMG in their cyber division and currently is the CEO of Cranium AI that helps enterprises wrap their minds around AI compliance. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, Jonathan. We've got a lot of cross synergy. We both attended Penn State. I currently work at KPMG. We're a partner at KPMG, so looking forward to a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it as well.
So let's get into it. So, you're currently the CEO of Cranium AI. Could you run the audience through what Cranium AI is and what you hope to achieve?
Yeah, so, Cranium was developed, we spun this business out of KPMG. As Ronak said, I was a partner running third-party security globally for KPMG. I helped stand up the AI security services, and I pitched the firm on the concept of Cranium because we were using a lot of AI inside of my services to help really support clients get to scale using, we built approximately 16 different models around third-party risk. And we were taking the most sensitive data. We were taking information across these enterprises, very large financial services, large pharmaceutical businesses, and then we were basically pushing it through models and then through endpoints to really solve these issues. The one thing that was not there was any discussion around security. So I said, this doesn't feel right. What's going on? And so we built Cranium. And then what I did is I pitched the firm on incubating Cranium. And we built the platform to really work with, AI services, whether they be enterprise AI services or generative services, to get an understanding of where that AI is, to start building monitoring and security capabilities around that, and then to provide compliance and third party so that you can understand whether or not the AI systems comply with internal standards, with things like the EU AI Act, NIST AI Risk Manager Framework, or other standards globally, as well as being able to do the same thing for vendors that are providing AI services. So Ronak, I know like AI is being embedded into everything, right? So this gave us an opportunity to start being able to address these needs as they were popping up for these large organizations.
Right, so that's super interesting, right? So you incubated Cranium from KPMG Studio, which is quite interesting, right? Not a lot of people start a company where their company funds or incubates their idea, right? So that's pretty interesting. Can you run the audience through how you went about that and how you started thinking of kind of incubating your own company within your current employer?
Yeah, it was great. I had a wonderful experience at KPMG. So obviously you're a KPMGer. We probably have others KPMGers listening. My experience was one where I found it extraordinarily entrepreneurial, right? So I was able to kind of build capabilities inside the firm to help drive advancements and innovation. And I felt that spirit from the rest of leadership to go really invest and support those capabilities and really start to drive things forward. And so when I had an opportunity to think about it, I didn't start at KPMG. Prior to joining KPMG, I was at the firm for a little under 4 years. I ran a software business, which I founded, called Prevalent. And with Prevalent, we actually helped to change the way people think about third-party risk management, and we built a platform for automation there. I ended up selling that business prior to going to the firm, but the lessons there that I learned were very relevant, and I was able to kind of build a very strong business on the back of building the business there. And so we had this opportunity. I pitched the firm. It was I remember distinctly, I built the pitch deck over a weekend. It was probably the worst pitch deck I ever built, and I got in front of leadership with it here in the US that was running the KPMG Studio. It had just been stood up. And they were looking for opportunities like Cranium because the firm needs to think about business models. It needs to think about how AI is going to disrupt the firm. They're very interested in looking at these different kinds of models to really ensure that innovation's happening at scale in one of the biggest enterprises in the world. And so the firm very quickly said yes. So it went up through leadership. the firm gave me my first $3 million to build the MVP. I got to pick who I wanted in the studio, and the KPMG Studio had put together a series of kind of gated processes from an incubation perspective. So how do we think about the market? How do we think about where it's going? How do we make sure that we're pulling the right people necessary to build the MVP? How do we make sure we go through that? And I had done a lot of that work in my previous life, but it was really nice because it was really structured to help us move through these gates in order to then ultimately get to the spin out, which we did last March. And then we obviously came out of stealth in April. And it not only enabled us to get ready for that, it did it in a way, right now, every large enterprise in the country, in the world, is trying to figure out, how do I think about AI security, AI governance? Am I prepared? How is this looking? Going through the process at KPMG enabled us to really meet the requirements of the firm in a way that made it easier coming out. Like, we got our SOC 2 at the end of the year. We were able to more easily manage that because we had to live to the standards, both from a software development perspective and a security perspective of the firm throughout our incubation process. It helped with fundraising. So we raised last year about $30 million. And, there was comfort in not only did we build this in the right way, but we built it with a partner like KPMG inside the studio that enabled that process to happen. So it was fun. It was nerve wracking. But it was really interesting because, like you said, normally this doesn't happen. And I found the firm extraordinarily supportive.
That's awesome. That's such an interesting way of starting a company. So, you were a partner at KPMG. I mean, this is not your first rodeo. You've been a CEO before. You've sold your company. So what is the difference between being a partner and a CEO of a company?
Yeah, I think KPMG is such a large organization globally with different structures for member firms and how people think about partnership. I think at its base, the way I looked at the partnership was I was responsible for running my practice and my business in a way that enabled us to be the best in class at what we did and bring our capabilities to clients and make sure that we were serving them at the standard of KPMG. And that's really what it boiled down to for me, was making sure we are a set of partners on a mission to do the best work across, and again, for me, it was about driving innovation and capabilities that were best in class. And I think you see that across all the services that KPMG provide, whether it be in advisory, tax, audit, but specifically in advisory, we really need to leverage that innovation piece. So as a partner, I didn't have to worry about payroll, right? Like I didn't have to worry about insurance. I didn't have to worry about running the business the same way day to day. I was really focused on, how do I build my specific practice, make that best in class, deliver the best services, have the best outcomes for clients, and then build my team to make sure I had the best people in the world on my team delivering those services. Here, I'm worried about everything, right? So as a manager and an owner and a CEO, we need to make sure not only do we have the right people, we have enough cash to support the mission. We have to make sure we have a vision that enables us to look forward. We have to have the best technologists in the world. So, we've brought on the best AI security team. So recently, last year, we brought on Josh Hargis as an example, who is our AI security chief. And he was leading AI security research and red teaming at MITRE. And he brought on a couple of other people with him. We brought on our AI leader last year, Max Monley, who leads AI engineering and product. And he brought about a dozen other people with him from his previous company, where he was building enterprise scale retrieval augmented generation and LLM use cases for things like clinical trials. And so we've been able to marry this great work. That's an effort, right? At KPMG, a lot of these professionals are already in the business, and it's really bringing them together. At Cranium, we started with no people, and we had to build it up and go through that process, and then build the best product. So, it's just different. It's very similar, but I was hyper focused on the services and the practice I had, not the rest of the business. Here, I got to worry about everything and everybody.
Right, that makes sense. So it seems like KPMG was a more easier role, but
I wouldn't say it was easier. I
right,
certainly, I would say it was. I loved my time at KPMG, but it was different than running a small business. I felt like I was part of a bit, obviously that much bigger machine and capability. But there's beauty in both sides of it, Rona.
right. No, that makes sense. So the AI boom has been quite abundant over the past year and a half. What OpenAI did with their ChatGPT and stuff like that. So, as a senior leader, as an executive, how do you expect your workforce to change? How do you expect workforce productivity to increase? Like, how have you recalibrated what your expectations are from your team?
Yeah, so I can just tell you like how I think about our AI strategy. And, I think every business is going through this same kind of process. The fortunate part for me is that I don't have any of the legacy. I'm starting from, a startup perspective. So this is going to be slightly different for, obviously very large companies that we work with, and we can talk about that. But I think about, the use of AI to help supplement my product, right? So how do I use AI in my product? How do I use AI to help build my products, right? And then how do I use AI in my product, in my business workflows and use cases in such a way that enables me to get the type of leverage that allows me to build a business that can scale in a way that we couldn't ever imagine, right? So if you think about kind of exponential technologies, now we're seeing exponential technologies compounding on top of additional exponential technologies. In the past, it was pretty linear, right? We would have a workflow tool. I helped build one of those, right? We had a workflow tool. Then you had to have people running the workflow tool. But it wasn't like you could do without all of that. It was like, we're going to mush this together and we're going to get some level of kind of growth above what a human could do. But now we're seeing this type of exponential capability where, AI is fundamentally going to change every single workflow. It's going to change every single job. Coding, I think, is a great example where 90% of coding today and application developers today are using AI as a supplement to their coding experience. I think that's getting so good that ultimately, I don't know how you're going to have really, really junior developers. I think you're going to see that layer of abstraction to the point where you're going to have very, very senior developers tied to really senior AI providers, and you're going to see this all self-organize, and AI is going to take care of the rest of it as a single use case. And we're already starting to see the impact of that.
Right. How has AI kind of sort of changed your productivity and improved your workflows? Are there like some AI tools that are become a constant in your day-to-day routine?
Absolutely. And what we've seen again is we're actively looking for use cases for AI where they make sense. And we've incented our team. So we've put a pool of money together for our teams to actually go solve these problems in the company, where if we don't have to, necessarily hire a position that was potentially going to, do something that now AI could do, but now we can uplift those skills. That's absolutely something that we want to, incent that behavior. I would tell you, we've also changed the structure of how we do our work. So we have our AI team, and we paired the team with developers and others, and they self-form around the features in our products, and then they continue to self-form. So there's a tremendous locus of control. Everybody's an AI engineer. We drive that together to solve the problems that we need in the product and the features, and they go at pace. And then the AI tools underpinning them, especially for code development, we've built our own secure retrieval, RAG, retrieval augmented generation service. We built that secure LLM infrastructure, and then everything sits on top of that. So we build those use cases, and then we use them every day to accelerate our growth. I think that code development is a use case that we're seeing active use today on everything. I think you're going to start seeing, we're using some AI inside of like both sales, marketing, and I think our finance function is now looking for those use cases as well.
Right. So, every business, right, whether it's an SME or a large Fortune 500 company, is just looking at, hey, how can I capitalize on AI? Like, what are the opportunities that AI presents to me? How does it improve my day to day? How does it make my customers' lives better, right? So first, I wanted to kind of talk about like the Fortune 500 companies, the large scale enterprises, right? Uh, how should they approach, AI? How should they think about deploying AI systems, deploying products and services around generative AI, and then, moving into kind of the security part of it, the governance part of it?
Yeah, so I think the challenges that large enterprises are facing today is that this, like AI is not new, right? They've been investing in AI in some cases for a dozen years or so. The challenge is it's the type of AI that's new. And like you mentioned, generative AI. So in certain organizations, they've got hundreds, if not thousands of models that may be deployed inside. But in a lot of cases, security was not really focused on how to secure what we now know are potentially major threat vectors for even enterprise AI services. So the way we look at those are slightly different than the way we think about generative AI threats. And we really look at, threats to things like data poisoning and backdoor detection and other kind of unique, machine learning threats that are inside of those machine learning operations and those hyperscalers. So that's kind of one piece of it. And we've created techniques that enable us to actually monitor data sets, monitor the models, monitor the toolkits, and enable the process of getting that. When it comes to Gen AI, I think there's so much experimentation going on right now, Ronak, and it's popping up into every product. I think that there's a lot of challenges there. One thing that people really want to do is they want to take their data, they want to expose it using their own security controls. They want to expose it to an LLM, and they want to leverage that LLM without training it and without hallucination, right? So we've spent a lot of time on that research on what is the best way to do that. We've even done red teaming on RAG services that we've built to show that we could break them. And then what would we need to do to fix that so that we can ensure that our clients are using safe and secure RAG architectures to do just that. Retrieve their data, expose it to the LLMs for being able to provide that outcome. And so that work continues. I think that work is always going to continue. And I think we've kind of put a framework together that says we're going to let the build teams build. We're going to figure out how the red teams attack, the blue teams defend, and we're going to make sure we're exercising that process over and over and over again to make sure that things like data loss for, a Gen AI service doesn't impact a customer. We don't train models that aren't intended to train, and we can really limit hallucinations significantly.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty important that you made the distinction between traditional AI models and generative AI models, right? There's a lot of evaluation methods and metrics within the traditional AI spaces, the AI models, but like the generative AI testing and evaluating these models get quite cumbersome. There's no really good way to kind of test and evaluate the performance of this, right? And I think it's just because of the inherent nature of how generative AI is built and trained, right? It's oftentimes you want to kind of you put an input X and then you expect a certain output, but it doesn't, right? It's so unpredictable in its behavior, the black box nature of it becomes quite challenging. So how are you seeing people so what are some of the interesting approaches people are doing to kind of test and evaluate these models before deploying it into customers' hands?
Yeah, this is one of the requirements that's starting to pop up in a lot of the regulations is how do I think about red teaming? So we recently got put on a committee. There's a consortium that NIST just put together for AI safety. It's an AI safety consortium. It's about 200 custom companies, including some of the largest developers of Gen AI services. Cranium's in there. I think KPMG is one of those companies in there. And the whole point is we need to think slightly differently about this because, again, foundational models are being used across this. We see some where we can touch them, right? We have the ability to touch certain open source LLMs. We have some of that, and we can certainly do different things if it's more white box. But in to your point, those black box LLM services become really difficult, and so we're going to put our red teaming chops to the test. We're going to start to automate some of those processes to ensure that we can go through a red teaming process, whatever gets pulled into an enterprise Gen AI use case. The techniques today are different, right? So you have some prompt injection techniques. We started automating the generation of the attack tree process and looking at how do we think about the threats depending upon how these services are being used. So in some cases, they're coming into, a code repo. In some cases, they're not. In some cases, they're going through another product or another service. And so in each of those use cases, we need slightly different techniques. And those are, continuing to get built out. The reality, though, is that there is still complete overtrust in these services. And there are certainly vulnerabilities in these services that are hitting the news. And we need to make sure that we start to, recovering them, and people don't just continue to overtrust them and just use them without that oversight and governance.
Right. So, one of the things that Cranium does is ensures that companies are compliant based on the laws and regulations, right? The EU with their GDPR, they're always ahead of sort of coming up with laws and order like pertaining to technology, right? What are your views on the EU AI Act? What do you think about what the UK is doing? And then if you can sort of delve into what the US executive order on AI is, and what is your just overall macroscopic view on AI regulations?
Yeah, look, I think regulation here is going to be absolutely necessary to get organizations and governments comfortable. Like we need them. I think the fear of regulation is that it's going to stop innovation. I think that there's a genuine fear that we need to take on risk in order to drive innovation with Gen AI, and the benefits of that outweigh some of these risks. I think the EU, to your point, is taking leadership on how to really start to impose these principles of security and safety and trust into organizations where if they don't think about these things and they don't do them appropriately by next year, it's going to be really expensive if they can't prove that they're doing some level of compliance, right? Like GDPR was 4% of turnover. I think the EU AI Act is 7% of turnover, right? It's like way more expensive if you don't comply. So I think that there is going to be a lot of effort spent on complying with these regulations. My hope is that as we saw the presidential executive order hit, and there is a lot of overlap, right? There's a lot of overlap with NIST and ISO and some of the requirements that are coming through the president's EO, as well as some of the individual state EOs and individual country orders, whether, as Canada and Australia and other countries have started to write some of theirs that go through the approval process. So I think there is some base of understanding of some of the things that they're expecting. I think at the basis level, people want to get an understanding of how this was built, get transparency into the data, get information about how ethical and fair the models are generally, and then that they have security capabilities so that they can make that more explainable. I think what's going to be difficult here, Ronak, is what are these lawsuits? So you saw the New York Times,
Sorry, I was going to bring that up.
Sue for fair use. So I don't think that's going to actually ultimately. I believe that'll get settled. My personal opinion, right? I don't have any knowledge around this. But what happens if it isn't? Does that mean they would have to, unlearn, untrain, these models? That becomes extraordinarily difficult.
Exactly.
And if we go, we don't really have mechanisms meaningfully for that. What happens about right to be forgotten, right? How do you manage these GDPR risks? I think these are all going to be very similar type of risks, and we don't know that yet, right? You can put anything in a regulation unlearning is really hard. It breaks stuff, right? And so we're going to have to really start thinking about how do we, and we've been doing some research around this as well. I'm not sure there's a great answer. I think the regs are as good as they're going to get for now. And then as we learn more, my hope is they iterate fast enough so that they don't create challenges for organizations downstream.
Right. I think a lot of people that get concerned with sort of the over-regulating that stifles innovation, especially the U.S. and like the China comparison, right? A lot of people in America are worried that the government will come in, start regulating these companies, innovation will stifle, and China will go and get ahead, right? How, do you like who gets AI today? Do you think the tech companies get it? Because it seems like no one really gets how to kind of regulate it, right? Do you think like how should the government come to a consortium of sort of rules or principles in which we all can abide by, right? Because these are such powerful technologies that have sort of lifelong ramifications of how human life is, right? So how do you think the government should go about seeking the best advice to make sure that they're passing laws and orders that, sort of increase innovation, but also protect their citizens?
I'm gonna let you know this. We're gonna do this again a year from now or 6 months from now. We're going through this process. So the way that the NIST ASIC works, this new consortium for AI safety, AISC, yeah. How that works is, they've pulled these 200 organizations together. There's 5 working groups with multiple topics from red teaming to governance to safety and harm. I think this is the best way to do it. Get the people who are developing and helping to drive an understanding of how the techniques for securing and managing visibility and governance together. Let's figure out as a group, what are the things that organizations need to think about? What are some of the practices that people can do today and that they need to start building into their products and to their services, and then start to iterate on that. And so I'm very, very hopeful. We'll be participating in that. And I'm very hopeful that we're going to have the ability to come together with these other leaders and say, this is the most practicable way to solve this that's going to enable organizations to meet these requirements meaningfully. But I don't see another way to do it. I think if regulators and legislators just decided to do this on their own, just the nature of these AI systems and the learning systems and there's so many different types, there's so many different models, there's so many different kinds of data. I think you run the risk of it getting very ugly very quickly. But I think they are taking a measured approach here. I think getting these groups together and these working groups together and really driving this listening process and then putting the learnings into the standards and then ultimately into the requirements is probably the right way.
Right. So, you'd mentioned the New York Times lawsuit with OpenAI. OpenAI is basically trained across the whole internet corpus, right? There's no incentive for the person who's gathered and collected and curated the data, right? GPT just got access to all of the data and, become this super intelligent tool. Like, how do you see opportunities for, sort of people that are gathering and accumulating data to monetize off LLMs being trained across their data? Like, do you think there should be some regulation to make sure that, they're also getting some incentive, some financial incentive?
I mean, if I have to guess around some of the outcomes there, one, you've already seen some of the changes in ChatGPT to create your own GPT with your own data. You can kind of envision in the future, especially with multimodal kind of AI systems and data sets, right? Like you can almost envision like that starts to get separated where you can start to see branding for people's individual data sets that are potentially separated. It's still going to be able to be used, but it would only be used if you're paying. And there's a mechanism to control trademark and continue to get attribution to whoever's artwork that is. And so I definitely think we're moving to a different place where especially things that historically were not behind paywalls that are now. I think you're going to start to see this start to come in, and there's going to be a mechanism at some level to be able to gate some additional content. But I think it's going to have to go through these lawsuits and processes in order to get there. It is not like all of a sudden, these AI companies are saying, yes, let's build something that allows you to get paid and potentially hurts me. It's going to be this effort of really working through, what does this mean? What if I want you to pull my stuff out? What if we're willing to work together as partners so that you can have my data? But how do I get compensated for that? I mean, we went through the same thing when the internet first started, right? Some companies don't exist anymore. Nobody thought Napster was going to go out of business. You're going to see some AI companies go out of business. It's just not going to work, right? You're going to see some models that will be unusable if these things get adjudicated the way that I think they will. And then you'll see new forms of AI use with these data sets where there will be fair use and there'll be payment.
Right. So you're just moving to Cranium AI, right? Why should a company, kind of invest and get into using a tool like Cranium AI?
Well, I think we address some of the use cases that we just talked about, right? Like the teams don't really know where AI systems are or how they're being used today. So fundamentally, we want people to really understand where that is today. We need to get a good understanding from a risk perspective, the use of AI, how is our most sensitive data going into these systems? Are we putting that at risk? Is that an acceptable risk? If you look at just the yellow teams, just the build teams, allowing them to answer those questions by themselves becomes very difficult because their perspective is only in terms of building AI systems to solve a particular problem. So we now need to really bring in a broader set. Over the last year, you've seen a lot of organizations stand up AI governance communities and start to build policies. I think this year they're now looking to kind of tool that up. And I think Cranium is a great alternative for companies that want to be able to, better understand those pieces, get visibility, AI risk assessment, red teaming, compliance transparency, and do that through their supply chain and third party.
Right. So what is your hope for AI? What do you think humanity's hope for AI is?
I'm actually very hopeful. So when people ask me about AI, a lot of my peers will go negative. I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we are going to solve problems that have plagued humanity for hundreds, if not thousands of years. We are already seeing this happening inside of like material models where we've created more, like I think Google had an announcement. They created more materials from a material science perspective in a single week than had been created in hundreds of years before that. And so now you can harness this to start building things that enable way solutions to problems we couldn't have even imagined, right? How do we build better, chips? How do we build better materials that are lighter to take us to the moon or to other planets? How do we build things that are, less susceptible to breaking? And that's just 1 week. What about the medical breakthroughs, right? So some of our largest clients are pharmaceutical businesses. They've been using models for a long time to develop new molecules, but we're going to see such breakthroughs now as these generative capabilities start to develop, just solutions for even the smallest diseases where there wasn't a huge financial incentive to go solve these things, but now it's easier because we have this, as you said, incredible corpus of information leverageable across the entire planet to go solve these problems. So I'm extraordinarily hopeful. I think those big ticket questions that we were never able to answer, if done appropriately, we're going to be able to get those answers, and we're going to unlock human potential in a way we never thought. It's going to be very painful until we figure out how to put these guardrails around it. But as we start to see the outcomes of this, especially if at Penn State, over the last several years, I've been part of the Nittany AI Alliance. It's kind of, they have a competition, AI for good. And so I set up a scholarship for students to help support that effort. And it's been amazing to watch, right? And so I think if we look at it from the lens of AI for good, it's going to be unbelievable. And there's always going to be bad actors, and we have to make sure that we address those, especially if they have AI-powered solutions. You're going to need AI-powered defenses, right?
Right. Actually, one of the reasons I kind of found out about you was because of the Nittany AI competition. When I was at Penn State, I took part in it. I was one of the finalists at one of the competitions. I remember it was like some NLP thing. Yeah, if we had generative AI, I think we would have probably won. But yeah, times keep changing. But that's exactly how I found you. But yeah, I think I share your same optimism on AI. I choose to be optimistic. I do think that the world's going to be a lot better in terms of, you said you've worked with a lot of pharmaceutical companies, drug discovery, personalized medicine. All of these things are just going to change and get revolutionized. But how do you address the people who are concerned in terms of, what are the sort of what are the jobs of tomorrow, right? Because this was the thing, right? Like pre generative AI, like we thought that AI wouldn't be as sort of creative, right? Like you look at like DALL-E and some of the stuff. A lot of like famous scholars and data, like AI experts also never thought like AI would be able to be so creative. I feel like AI is coming for a lot of creative jobs first. Some of the more mundane, like laborious tasks are still super hard to automate. So how do you address questions and concerns when like people ask like, how does work life look like?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It is, and I think the reality, Ronak, is we can't say it's not going to change any longer. We know it's going to change.
Right.
And so I think we need to start planning for that change. But I would say it's not dissimilar to any of the major revolutionary changes that we've seen in computing and the impact that that has had on society, right? We have to plan for this massive amount of change. It's going to change the way we structure work. It's going to change in the way that we develop products and services. And so I actually am, again, looking at this optimistically. We haven't seen the benefits from an exponential perspective, but I think you're going to see that very shortly. There will be pain, especially if you have a job that can be done by AI more easily. I think it's time to start thinking about retraining and thinking about how are you going to leverage AI in the job that you're doing? How are you going to take advantage of the capability of the courseware that's there almost across every field right now, where people are starting to think about AI use inside of whatever they're trying to get done. And if you do that today and you get on the path, I think you're going to be very well employed. I think if you don't do that and you're in a knowledge job and you're just starting out and you're not willing to do the learning, it's going to be painful. It's going to be a bit painful.
Right. So one last question that just like popped up in my head before I kind of end our conversation is, you're a partner at KPMG. How does consulting businesses look 10 years from now? With agents and stuff, it's already making our jobs a lot more easier. Like, how does consulting look like?
Yeah, these questions are being asked by all the senior leaders at KPMG. I guarantee you, I've been involved in some of them.
Right.
And I think the answers are not yet completely defined. I think there's always going to be a place if you're the best in the world at something, right? Regardless of what that something is, you're always going to have to be there, and you're going to be employed. Right. I think the question is, what does consulting look like if you're an associate? Is it now you only need one associate that used to do the job of two? Right. Is it that you now have to get to senior associate and manager and director and MD and partner? Is that now not the same type of work? I think the answer is yes. It's different types of work. There's going to be an expectation from clients where the KPMG is going to be able to get more leverage. But AI also offers an opportunity for KPMG, just given how capable KPMG is in AI, to actually define this for clients too. So although some of the work may transition, new work starts to present in order to go solve this for clients in a meaningful way. So I think with every technology, every technology revolution, I think there is that dual side to it. And my gut tells me once we've gone through this transition, it's actually going to be really beneficial for KPMG from a growth perspective. But these questions have not been answered. I think the reorganization of work is, as these tools get deployed, it'll iterate, and I think it'll be something new, but it'll be pretty familiar too. Like the outputs will be familiar, the conversations with clients around how they want to go, they still need to go sell stuff and build stuff, right? It's how are they going to do that and use these tools to help manage that and drive even more growth. And so again, you got to kind of put that hopeful, if these conversations, Ronak, weren't happening, I'd be very concerned. But fortunately, I think these conversations are happening, and I think the firm's making those changes, and we've seen that directly, and I think we're helping to support the security and compliance of that.
Yeah, I think that's the paradox of AI. Like the future looks super exciting, but super scary as well at the same time. But yeah, I choose to be on the board of the optimist, and I think you share the same sentiment. So yeah, we're come to the end of the podcast. Jonathan, it was so great to have you on, with sharing all of your great insights, with Cranium, with your knowledge in just AI in general. It was really a fruitful conversation. I got a lot of it. I hope the audience got a lot from it as well. I'm going to put the links to Cranium AI. If you're a business interested, check it out. And also put your LinkedIn so people can reach out to you. Any closing remarks?
No, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I think this, again, I find this a really meaningful and mission-driven conversation. So like for me, I'm thinking about this every day. I know people are trying to figure this out. Feel free to reach out anytime. Would love to have the conversation. And Ronak, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much.